In the autumn of 1066, an English king won the greatest victory in the history of Saxon England. He annihilated the last great Viking army ever to invade these shores. And 19 days later, that very victory would destroy his kingdom forever. Everyone remembers Hastings. Almost no one remembers the battle that came first, the one that should have saved England. This is Stamford Bridge. It began with a death and an empty throne. In January 1066, old King Edward the Confessor died with no son. The next day, the most powerful man in England, Harald Godwinson, was crowned. But two other men believed the crown was theirs. William, Duke of Normandy, across the Channel to the south. And in the north, the most feared warrior in Europe, Harald Hardrada, King of Norway, the last great Viking, backed by Harald's own exiled, vengeful brother, Tostig. England would be attacked from two directions at once. The Vikings struck first. Hardrada's fleet, by most accounts around 300 ships, came up the rivers of Yorkshire. On the 20th of September, at Fulford, just outside York, the Norwegians crushed the northern English earls in a savage battle. York opened its gates. It looked for a moment as if the Viking age was about to be reborn, and England would have a Norse king once more. 300 miles to the south, King Harald was waiting on the coast for William's invasion. Then the news from the north reached him, and Harald did something almost beyond belief. He turned his army around and marched it nearly 190 miles from London to Yorkshire in roughly 4 days, gathering fighting men from every shire as he went. The Norwegians, celebrating their victory, had no idea an English army even existed nearby. Harald was about to fall on them like a thunderbolt. On the 25th of September, the Norwegians were waiting at a river crossing called Stamford Bridge, expecting nothing more than hostages from York. It was a hot day, and many had left their heavy mail armor back at the ships. Then they looked up and saw the dust of an entire English army bearing down on them. Hardrada had been caught completely by surprise, and here England earns its most famous legend. As the English charged the narrow bridge, the story goes that a single giant Norseman blocked it alone, swinging a great axe, cutting down man after man, by one account more than 40, holding back an entire army by himself. Until, they say, an Englishman floated underneath in a boat and thrust a spear up through the planks. We should be honest, this tale only appears in writing a century later, and the famous detail of the barrel is later still. But true or not, it captured something real, the sheer ferocity of the fight for that bridge. Across the bridge, the real battle was a horror. Two shield walls locked together and ground each other down for hours. The unarmored Norwegians fought desperately. A relief force ran so hard from the ships that men dropped dead of exhaustion before they reached the field. And in the chaos, Harald Hardrada, the last great Viking, was struck down, the sagas say, by an arrow to the throat. Tostig, the king's brother, fell too. The Norwegian army was annihilated. The scale of it is told in a single chilling number. Of the great fleet of more than 300 ships that had come to conquer England, only 24 were needed to carry the survivors home. Stamford Bridge is where the Viking age in England died. For 250 years they had come for this island. They would never come like this again. Harald Godwinson had just saved England. He had perhaps 3 days to savor it. Because as Harald's exhausted, bleeding army rested in the north, the wind changed in the south. On the 28th of September, William of Normandy landed unopposed at Pevensey. And Harald had to do the impossible all over again. Turn his shattered men around and march the length of England, back the way they had come, to face a fresh enemy. The luckiest break in William's life was the timing of a Viking. They met at Hastings on the 14th of October, just 19 days after the greatest victory in Anglo-Saxon history. Harold's tired, depleted army held the hill all day against the Norman cavalry and archers, and very nearly won. But by nightfall the king was dead, the shield wall was broken, and England, the old Anglo-Saxon England of Alfred and Aethelstan, was finished. The Normans had come to stay, a word of honesty, the kind this channel insists on. Our sober facts, the dates, the deaths, the 300 ships, and the 24 that sailed home, come from the contemporary Anglo-Saxon chronicle. But the colour, Hardrada's giant stature, his defiant poetry, the lone hero on the bridge, comes mostly from a Norse saga written more than a century and a half later. So picture the saga, by all means, but know which part is bedrock and which part is bard. The legend is magnificent. The truth is enough. Think on what Harald did in those 3 weeks. He destroyed one of the most fearsome invasions England ever faced, marched the length of his kingdom twice, and fought 2 of the bloodiest battles of the age. No king was ever asked to do more. Stamford Bridge was the last great victory of Anglo-Saxon England, and its tragedy is that it came 19 days too soon. If you want to know how that final day at Hastings unfolded, and how England was remade by the Normans, then subscribe and walk with us to the hill where an age ended. This is your history too.